In the dying light of a Colorado winter, Sam Calder pressed his face against his daughter's tiny chest, listening for the heartbeat that grew fainter each day. The goat's milk wouldn't take. The bottles lay shattered on the floor. His wife was 3 weeks dead, and his infant was following her into the ground. He had no family, no wet nurse within 50 miles, and no hope left except the desperate note he'd nailed to his door that morning. Please, milk for dying baby, will pay anything. When the knock finally came through the howling storm, he didn't know he was opening the door to salvation or scandal. Before we begin, I invite you to stay with us until the very end of this story. And please comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The ranch house squatted low against the frozen Colorado hills like something trying to disappear into the earth. Its windows were dark except for one, a single lamp burning in the front room where Sam Calder sat holding his daughter and watching her die. June was 6 weeks old and weighed less now than she had at birth. Her skin had gone papery and gray, stretched too tight over bones that shouldn't be visible yet. When she cried, which was less and less often, it came out as a thin mule that barely disturbed the air. Sam had stopped sleeping 3 days ago. He couldn't bear to close his eyes and wake to find her still and cold in the cradle Rose had sanded smooth with her own hands. Rose. God, Rose. 22 years old and buried in the hillside cemetery with her name carved crooked because Sam's hands had shaken too hard to hold the chisel steady. She'd bled out 2 hours after June came into the world, her last words a whispered plea. Keep her warm, keep her fed, promise me. He'd promised. He'd sworn it on everything holy, and now he was breaking that promise one labored breath at a time. The goat's milk sat curdled in a pan on the stove. June wouldn't take it. She'd spit up everything he tried to feed her through the rubber nipple he'd ordered from Denver, a newfangled thing that was supposed to save babies like his. Instead, it had cost him $3 and bought him nothing but more screaming and a floor sticky with wasted milk. Sam's eyes burned. He'd cried himself empty 2 weeks ago. Now there was just this hollow ache and the mechanical persistence of a man who didn't know how to stop trying, even when trying was useless. The note had been his last idea. A stupid, desperate gesture that made him feel like he was doing something even though he knew it wouldn't matter. He'd scrawled it in shaking letters across the back of an old feed invoice. Please, milk for dying baby, will pay anything. Then he'd nailed it to the front door before he could talk himself out of it, before shame could stop him from advertising his failure to anyone who might ride past. No one had come. Of course no one had come. It was January in the Colorado Territory. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles off, and the town of Bitterroot sat another 7 miles beyond that. The cattle were holed up in the south pasture. The chickens had stopped laying. The whole world had gone cold and quiet and empty, and Sam was alone in it with a baby he couldn't save. He shifted June in his arms, trying to find a position that might ease whatever pain she felt. She barely stirred. Her little fist, once so quick to grip his finger, lay slack against his chest. I'm sorry, he whispered into her dark hair. God, June, I'm so sorry. The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters. Sam could hear the first spatter of sleet towel against the windows. Another storm rolling in from the mountains. The third one this week. He should get up and check the fire, make sure the woodpile was stocked, close the shutters tight. All the things a good rancher did to weather a storm. But he didn't move. He just sat there holding his daughter and waiting for the end. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Footsteps on the porch. Sam's head snapped up. For a wild moment his heart leaped with impossible hope. Had someone actually seen the note? But it was nearly midnight in a blizzard. Who would be out in this weather? More likely it was just the wind or a branch scraping the boards or his exhausted mind playing tricks on him. Then the knock came. 3 soft raps against the door. Sam stood so fast he nearly dropped June. She made a small sound of protest, and he clutched her tighter, his pulse hammering in his throat. He crossed the room in 4 strides and yanked the door open. A woman stood on his porch, soaked through to the skin and shivering. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her face. Her dress, a simple gray wool thing, was plastered to her frame, and her hands were clutched tight around her own arms like she was trying to hold herself together. She looked up at him with eyes that were red-rimmed and haunted. "I saw your note," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "I can help." Sam stared at her. He knew this woman, Eliza Hart. She lived on the neighboring property with her husband William, or she had, until William had taken sick with pneumonia last fall and died in the same week Rose went into labor. Sam had been so consumed with his own crisis that he'd barely registered the news. He'd seen Eliza once at the general store after that, moving through the aisles like a ghost, buying nothing, just standing there among the canned goods with her hand pressed to her stomach. She'd been pregnant then, heavily pregnant. Sam's eyes dropped to her midsection now, flat, or nearly so. His gaze snapped back to her face. "Your baby died." Eliza said it flatly, like she'd practiced the word until it lost all meaning. 3 weeks ago. He lived 4 days. The sleet was coming down harder now, pelting her shoulders and face. She didn't seem to notice. "I heard the baby crying this afternoon when I rode past," she continued. Her voice was still soft, but there was something fierce underneath it now. "I heard it, and I turned around and came back and saw your note." She swallowed hard. "I know what you need, and I can give it to you." Sam's brain felt slow and stupid with exhaustion. It took him too long to understand what she was offering. "You mean, I still have milk?" Eliza met his eyes directly. There was no embarrassment in her face, no shame, just a desperate, aching need that mirrored his own. "My body doesn't know my son is gone. It keeps making milk for a baby who isn't here, and your baby needs milk, so I can feed her, if you'll let me." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was impossible. June made another weak sound against his chest, and all his paralysis shattered. "Yes." He stepped back from the door, pulling it wide. "Yes. God, yes. Please come in." Eliza stumbled over the threshold, and Sam shut the door behind her, sealing out the storm. She stood dripping on his floor, her whole body shaking with cold, her eyes fixed on the bundle in his arms. "Can I?" Her voice cracked. "Can I hold her?" Sam didn't hesitate. He crossed the space between them and placed June in her arms. Eliza's face crumpled. She looked down at the baby, and a sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a prayer. June stirred slightly, turning her head toward the warmth of another body. Eliza's hand came up to cradle the baby's skull with a tenderness that made Sam's chest ache. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, sweetheart. You're so hungry, aren't you?" She glanced up at Sam. "Where can I sit?" "Here." He grabbed his chair and dragged it closer to the fire. "Is this all right?" "It's fine." Eliza sank into the seat, moving like she was afraid she might break something. Then, with shaking hands, she began unbuttoning the front of her dress. Sam turned away immediately, his face burning. He busied himself with the fire, throwing on another log, adjusting the poker, doing anything to give her privacy. Behind him, he could hear the rustle of fabric, and then a long pause. When Eliza spoke again, her voice was tight with tears. "She won't latch. She's too weak." Sam turned back. Eliza had the baby pressed to her breast, but June's head lolled loosely, her mouth barely moving. Panic shot through him. What if they were too late? What if June was too far gone to even try? "Here." He dropped to his knees beside the chair. "Let me help." Together they worked to position June's mouth against Eliza's nipple. Sam supported the baby's head while Eliza tried to coax milk into her mouth, squeezing gently to let drops fall onto June's lips. It felt surreal, kneeling here with a near stranger while they struggled to save his daughter's life. But June's little tongue finally moved. She tasted the milk, and something in her brain flickered awake. Her mouth opened wider. She latched. The sound she made was small and wet and hungry. Then she began to suck. Eliza gasped. Her whole body went rigid and then relaxed all at once. She bent over the baby, her wet hair falling forward to curtain them both, and Sam watched as tears streamed down her face. Tears of relief, or grief, or maybe both at once. "That's it," Eliza whispered. "That's it, baby. Take as much as you need." June drank, really drank. Her tiny hands came up to press against Eliza's breast, and her eyes fluttered closed in something that looked almost like peace. The room filled with the sound of her feeding, that soft, rhythmic gulp that was the most beautiful thing Sam had ever heard. He sat back on his heels, suddenly dizzy. It was working. She was eating. After weeks of screaming and starvation and watching his daughter fade away, she was finally eating. "Thank you." His voice came out hoarse and broken. "God, thank you." Eliza didn't look up from June. She just nodded, still crying silently, still bent over the baby like she was sheltering something precious. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire crackled, the storm howled outside, and June Calder drank her fill for the first time in her short, desperate life. When the baby finally pulled away, milk-drunk and heavy-lidded, Eliza gently lifted her to her shoulder to burp her. June made a small sound of contentment and tucked her face against Eliza's neck. Within seconds, she was asleep. "She's so small," Eliza murmured. She was rocking slightly now, an unconscious motion. "So little." "She's lost weight." Sam scrubbed a hand over his face. "The doctor said if I couldn't get her to eat soon, she'd—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "She'll eat now." Eliza's voice was firm. She looked at Sam directly. "I can come back tomorrow. And the day after. As many times as she needs until she's strong enough to take a bottle." "Tomorrow?" Sam repeated stupidly. "Unless—" Eliza's certainty wavered. "Unless you'd rather find someone else. I know this is strange. I know people will talk, but I can't just walk away now that I've held her." Sam stared at her. At this woman who'd walked through a blizzard to answer a desperate note nailed to a stranger's door. This woman who'd just saved his daughter's life without asking for anything in return. "I don't want anyone else," he said. "If you're willing to help, then yes, God, yes. Tomorrow and every day after." Something in Eliza's face eased. She looked back down at June, who was snoring softly against her shoulder, one tiny fist curled under her chin. "I should go," Eliza said. But she didn't move. "In this storm?" Sam stood and crossed to the window. The sleet had turned to snow, thick, heavy flakes that were already piling up against the fence posts. "You can't ride home in that. You'll freeze before you get halfway there." "I've ridden in worse." "Not while soaked to the bone, you haven't." Sam turned back to her. "There's a room off the kitchen. It's small, but it's warm and the bed's made up. You can stay the night and head home at first light." Eliza hesitated. Sam could see the war in her face, propriety versus practicality. The same war he'd fought when he'd nailed that note to his door. "All right," she said finally, "just for tonight." Sam showed her to the small room that had once been Rose's sewing space. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk. He lit the lamp while Eliza stood in the doorway, still holding June. "I have some of Rose's old nightgowns," Sam said awkwardly. "They'd be dry, at least, and I can hang your dress by the fire." "That's kind of you." Sam fetched the nightgown and left Eliza to change. He returned to the main room and stoked the fire high, then hung her dripping dress and shawl over the backs of chairs to dry. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last hour was draining away, leaving him hollow and exhausted. June had eaten. June was sleeping. June was going to live. He sank into his chair and dropped his head into his hands. His shoulders shook with silent, wrenching sobs, weeks of terror and grief and exhaustion finally pouring out of him all at once. He didn't hear Eliza return until she spoke. "Mr. Calder?" He jerked upright, swiping roughly at his face. Eliza stood in the doorway wearing Rose's blue nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. She'd wrapped June in a blanket and was rocking her gently. "I'm sorry," Sam managed. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize." Eliza crossed the room and carefully placed June in the cradle by the fire. She straightened the blankets around the sleeping baby, then turned back to Sam. "You've been carrying this alone for weeks. Of course you're breaking under it." "I thought I was going to lose her." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "I thought I was going to bury her next to Rose, and I couldn't—" He couldn't finish. Eliza knelt in front of his chair. She didn't touch him, but her presence was steady and grounding. "You didn't lose her," she said quietly. "She's here. She's fed and sleeping, and she's going to be all right." Because of you. Because you asked for help when you needed it. That takes courage. Sam laughed bitterly. Courage. I nailed a note to my door like a coward because I couldn't face asking anyone directly. You asked. That's what matters. Eliza glanced at the cradle. When my son died, I couldn't ask for anything. I just shut the door and locked it and sat in his empty nursery for days. My body kept making milk for a baby who was gone, and it hurt, and I couldn't stop it, and I thought I'd go mad from it. Then, this afternoon, I heard your baby crying, and I thought, her voice cracked. I thought maybe I could still be a mother to someone. Sam looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't much older than Rose had been, mid-20s maybe. Her face was drawn and tired, but there was a strength in it too, the kind of strength that came from surviving what should have broken you. You are a mother, he said. Your son lived 4 days. Eliza's eyes were distant. I named him Thomas, after my father. He was so small, he never cried. He just slipped away. I'm sorry, she nodded. And I'm sorry about your wife. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd lost everything except the will to keep breathing. The fire popped and settled. Snow hissed against the windows. June slept on, oblivious to the grief that surrounded her cradle. You should rest, Sam said finally. It's late. Eliza stood. If she wakes in the night, bring her to me. I'll feed her. I will. She started toward the side room, then paused. Mr. Calder? Thank you for letting me do this. I know it's unconventional. Call me Sam, and thank you for everything. Eliza nodded and disappeared into the small room, closing the door softly behind her. Sam sat by the fire for a long time, watching June sleep. Her breathing was steady and even. Her color was already better. In the cradle beside him lay the baby who'd been dying 6 hours ago, now full and warm and alive. He thought about Rose, about the promise he'd made, about how he'd almost failed, but he hadn't failed. Not tonight. Tonight, through blind luck or divine intervention or simple human kindness, help had come. Eliza Hart had walked through a storm to save a stranger's child, and in doing so had maybe saved herself too. Sam didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know how this arrangement would work, or what people would say, or how long Eliza could keep coming. All he knew was that June had eaten and slept, and for now, that was enough. He checked the fire one last time, then carried the cradle into his bedroom and set it beside his bed. June stirred slightly but didn't wake. Sam stripped off his shirt and boots and lay down fully clothed on top of the quilts. He was too tired to do more. For the first time in 3 weeks, he slept. When Sam woke, gray dawn light was filtering through the curtains. He jerked upright in a panic. Had he slept through June crying? But the cradle was empty, and from the main room he could hear soft voices. He pulled on his boots and stumbled out to find Eliza sitting in the chair by the fire, nursing June. She looked up when he entered. Good morning. I hope you don't mind. She woke about an hour ago, and I didn't want to disturb you. Sam ran a hand through his hair, trying to orient himself. The clock on the mantel read 6:30. He'd slept for nearly 7 hours straight. No, Thank you. He crossed to the stove and started building up the fire to make coffee. His hands moved through the familiar motions while his brain slowly caught up with the surreal reality of having a woman in his house, feeding his baby, like this was normal. The storm's passed, Eliza said. The sky's clearing. I should be able to ride home after breakfast. And you'll come back? If you want me to. Sam turned to face her. June was drinking steadily, her little hands kneading against Eliza's chest. She looked stronger already, more alert, more present. I want you to, he said. I need you to. At least until June is stable enough to take a bottle. That could be weeks. I don't care. Sam measured out coffee grounds with shaking hands. However long it takes, I'll pay you. I don't want payment. Eliza's voice was firm. I'm not doing this for money. Then what do you want? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was almost too soft to hear. I want to feel like a mother again, even if it's just for a little while. Something in Sam's chest cracked open. He turned back to the stove before she could see his face. You can have that, he said roughly, for as long as you need. They ate breakfast in near silence, fried eggs and yesterday's bread that Sam toasted over the fire. Eliza had dressed in her own clothes, now dry and stiff from the heat. She ate quickly, efficiently, like someone who'd learned not to linger. "I'll come back this afternoon," she said as she cleared her plate. "Around 3, if that suits you." "That's fine. I'll be here." Sam walked her out to the porch. Her horse was tied at the rail, shaking snow from its mane. The morning was cold and bright, the world blanketed in fresh powder. Eliza mounted up, then looked down at him. "Take care of her." "I will." She nodded and kicked the horse into a trot, disappearing down the road toward her own property. Sam stood on the porch watching until she was out of sight. Then he went back inside to June. The baby was awake in her cradle, waving her fists in the air and making small cooing sounds. Sam picked her up and held her close, breathing in the warm baby smell of her. "We're going to be all right," he whispered into her hair. "We're going to make it through." June grabbed his finger and held on tight. Sam let himself believe it. Eliza came back that afternoon as promised, and the next day, and the day after that. At first she stayed only as long as it took to nurse June, usually about an hour in the afternoon and again in the evening. She'd arrive quietly, feed the baby, and leave with minimal conversation. Sam tried to offer her tea or dinner, but she always declined, saying she needed to get back to her own chores. But June was gaining weight steadily, and as the baby grew stronger, Eliza began to linger. It started small. She'd accept a cup of coffee while waiting for June to wake from a nap. She'd help Sam fold the laundry while they talked about the weather. She'd stay for dinner on particularly cold nights, saying she didn't want to ride home in the dark. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she became part of the rhythm of the house. Sam found himself looking forward to her arrivals, not just because she was keeping June alive, but because the house felt less empty when she was there. She had a quiet way about her, steady and calm, that soothed something raw in him. They didn't talk much at first, but the silences between them were comfortable. One evening, about 2 weeks in, Sam was repairing a bridle by the fire while Eliza nursed June. Snow was falling softly outside, and the house was warm and quiet. "Tell me about your wife," Eliza said suddenly. Sam's hand stilled on the leather. "Rose? If you want to, I realize I'm caring for her daughter, and I don't know anything about her." Sam set down the bridle. He'd been avoiding thinking about Rose too directly. It hurt too much. But Eliza deserved to know. "She was practical," he said slowly. "And funny. She could fix anything. Broken fences, sick cattle, my terrible cooking. She grew up on a ranch in Wyoming and came here with her family when she was 16. I met her at a barn dance and married her 6 months later." "You must have loved her very much." "I did." Sam's throat tightened. She wanted a big family, 5 or 6 kids, a house full of noise and chaos. She was so happy when she found out about June. She spent months preparing, sewing clothes, building the cradle, painting the nursery, and then she died, giving you the one thing you both wanted most. "Yes." The word came out harsh. "And I can't stop thinking that if she'd never gotten pregnant, she'd still be alive. If I'd been more careful, You can't think like that." Eliza's voice was sharp. "You can't torture yourself with what-ifs. I did that after Thomas. I thought maybe if I'd eaten better or rested more or called the doctor sooner, he would have lived. But the truth is, some things just happen. Some babies don't make it. Some mothers don't either. And you can drive yourself mad trying to find someone to blame." Sam looked at her. "How did you stop?" "I haven't." Eliza smiled sadly. "But I'm trying. Caring for June helps. It gives me something to do besides sit in that empty house and imagine all the things my son will never be." "Tell me about him," Sam said quietly. "Thomas." Eliza glanced down at June, who was drowsing against her chest. When she spoke, her voice was soft with memory. "He was so small. Not even 5 pounds. The midwife said he came too early, that his lungs weren't ready. He tried to breathe, but it was like he was drowning in air. I held him for 4 days and I talked to him and sang to him and begged him to fight. But on the 4th morning, he just stopped. I'm sorry." "So am I." Eliza blinked hard. "My husband died 6 weeks before Thomas was born. Pneumonia. So my son never met his father, and I buried them both in the same month. Some days I don't know how I'm still standing. You're stronger than you think. So are you. They held each other's gaze across the firelight. Something passed between them, an understanding born of shared grief. They were both people who'd lost everything and were still somehow finding reasons to get up each morning. Thank you, Sam said, for being here, for June, for all of it. Eliza nodded. Thank you for letting me. After that night, the walls between them came down. They began to talk more freely about their childhoods, their dead spouses, their fears for the future. Sam learned that Eliza had been a school teacher before she married, that she loved reading but hated cooking, that she missed her mother who died when she was 12. Eliza learned that Sam had grown up in Pennsylvania, that he'd come west to start over after his father lost the family farm, that he'd built this ranch from nothing and was terrified of losing it. They talked about June, about her milestones and her funny expressions and the way she smiled now when Eliza walked in the room. They talked about Thomas and Rose, keeping their memories alive through stories. They talked about everything and nothing, and slowly, without either of them quite noticing, the grief that filled the house began to share space with something else, something that felt almost like hope. One evening in early February, Sam was fixing a broken shutter when Eliza came in from feeding June. She had the baby on her shoulder, patting her back gently. "She's getting so big," Eliza said. "Look at her cheeks." Sam looked. June had filled out considerably. Her face was round now, her arms pleasantly chubby. She looked like a healthy, thriving baby instead of the skeletal infant who'd nearly died in his arms. "That's because of you," he said. "It's because of milk. I'm just the delivery system." "It's more than that." Sam set down his hammer. "You've been coming here every day for a month. You've kept her alive when I couldn't. His voice cracked. "You've given me my daughter back." Eliza looked at him, her eyes shining. "Sam!" A knock at the door interrupted them. They both froze. It was past 8 o'clock and snowing again. Who would be calling at this hour? Sam opened the door to find Sheriff Mitchell on his porch, stamping snow from his boots. "Evening, Calder," the sheriff said. His gaze moved past Sam to where Eliza stood holding the baby. His expression hardened. "Mrs. Hart, I didn't realize you were still here." "I was just leaving," Eliza said quickly. "Bit late for a social call, isn't it?" The sheriff's tone was mild, but there was an edge underneath it. Sam's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Hart has been helping with the baby. June was sick and needed special care." "I'm sure." The sheriff didn't sound convinced. "Well, I won't keep you. I just wanted to stop by and see how you were managing, Calder. Town's been worried about you." "We're fine. Thank you for checking." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Good to hear it. Mrs. Hart, I'll be happy to escort you home. Dark roads can be dangerous." It wasn't a suggestion. Eliza's face went pale. She handed June to Sam without a word, then fetched her coat and shawl. Sam wanted to protest, to tell the sheriff to mind his own business, but he could see the warning in Eliza's eyes. "Don't make it worse." "Good night, Sam," she said quietly. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Of course." But as she rode off with the sheriff, Sam had a sick feeling in his gut. The town had noticed. The whispers had started, and their careful, fragile arrangement was about to come crashing down. The sheriff's visit changed everything. Eliza arrived the next afternoon as usual, but Sam could see the tension in her shoulders before she even dismounted. She tied her horse quickly and hurried inside without her usual greeting, her eyes darting to the road like she expected someone to be watching. "What did he say to you?" Sam asked as she shrugged off her coat. "Nothing. Everything." Eliza picked up June from the cradle, holding her close like a shield. "He rode alongside me the whole way home and talked about how important reputation is for a widow, how people in town are concerned about my welfare, how I need to be careful about appearances." "Appearances?" Sam's voice was hard. "You're keeping my daughter alive. I'm a widow spending hours alone in a widower's house. That's all they see." Eliza sat down heavily in the chair by the fire. He didn't say it directly, but the message was clear. People are talking. Sam wanted to argue, to say it didn't matter what small-minded gossips thought, but he'd lived in Bitterroot long enough to know that talk had teeth. A woman's reputation could be shredded by rumor alone. And once it was gone, there was no getting it back. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. Eliza looked down at June, who was already rooting against her chest, seeking milk. Her face was anguished. I don't know. If I stop coming, June could still get sick. She's stronger now, but she's not ready for a bottle yet. But if I keep coming, the talk will only get worse. So we're damned either way. Yes. They sat in miserable silence while Eliza nursed the baby. The fire crackled. Outside, the afternoon light was already fading toward dusk. Sam paced the room like a caged animal, his mind churning through options and finding none that worked. I could try to find another wet nurse, he said finally. Maybe someone from Denver, or that would take weeks and cost money you probably don't have. Eliza's voice was flat. No, I'm not leaving June. I'm going to have to be more careful. Come earlier in the day when it's less suspicious. Leave before dark. Keep my visits short. That's not fair to you. None of this is fair. Eliza looked at him, her eyes fierce. But I'm not abandoning this baby because people want to make up ugly stories. June needs me, so I'm staying. Relief flooded through Sam so powerfully it made his knees weak. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just help me figure out how to make this work. They tried. Over the next 2 weeks, Eliza came only during daylight hours, never staying longer than necessary. She varied her arrival times and took different routes to the ranch, trying to be less predictable. Sam made sure to leave his door wide open whenever she was there, a futile gesture toward propriety that fooled no one. But the damage was already done. The whispers had started, and once they began, they took on a life of their own. Sam heard them when he went to town for supplies. Conversations that stopped when he entered the general store. Women who crossed the street rather than greet him. The clerk who counted out his change with a smirk and said, "How's that baby of yours doing? I hear she's getting plenty of special attention." Sam had grabbed the man by his collar and slammed him against the counter before he could think better of it. "You want to repeat that?" The clerk had gone white. "No, sir. Just making conversation." "Then keep my family out of your mouth." Sam had left with his supplies and a reputation for violence to add to the rumors already circulating. He didn't care. Let them think what they wanted about him. But Eliza was bearing the brunt of it. She didn't tell him how bad it had gotten. He found out by accident when he rode over to her property to drop off some firewood he'd cut. He'd planned to leave it stacked by her barn and ride off without disturbing her. But as he approached the house, he saw them. 3 women from town standing on Eliza's porch. Mrs. Henderson from the church, Mrs. Blake, who ran the boarding house, and Mrs. Yates, the mayor's wife and the biggest gossip in 3 counties. Sam pulled his horse up short behind the barn, staying out of sight but close enough to hear. "We're concerned about you, dear." That was Mrs. Yates, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Living out here alone, no family to look after you. It's not proper." "I'm managing fine." Eliza's voice was strained. "Thank you for your concern." "Are you? Because we've heard you've been spending quite a bit of time at the Calder Ranch, helping with the baby, they say. June needed a wet nurse. I was able to help." "Oh, we're sure you were very helpful." Mrs. Blake's tone made it an insult. "But surely the baby can take a bottle by now. There's no need for you to keep visiting. June is still nursing. She's not ready to wean." "And how long do you intend to keep this arrangement going?" Mrs. Henderson's voice was sharp. "Until the baby's a year old? 2 years? Or until Mr. Calder decides he needs a new wife to warm his bed?" Sam's hands tightened on the reins. He was about to ride out and tell these vultures exactly what he thought of them when Eliza spoke again, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "How dare you? I have done nothing shameful. I have cared for a motherless baby who was starving to death. And if you want to twist that into something ugly, that says everything about you and nothing about me." "We're not twisting anything, dear. We're simply pointing out facts. A young widow spending hours alone with a widower, feeding his baby from her own body. If you can't see how improper that looks, get off my property." There was a stunned silence. "I beg your pardon?" Mrs. Yates sounded genuinely shocked. "You heard me. Get off my property right now before I get my husband's rifle and help you along." "Well," Mrs. Blake huffed, "I never—" "Go." Sam heard footsteps stomping down the porch, indignant muttering, the jingle of harnesses as the women climbed into their buggy. He stayed hidden until they'd driven off, then rode around to the front of the house. Eliza was sitting on the porch steps with her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard his horse, and her face was streaked with tears. "How much did you hear?" she asked. "Enough." Sam dismounted and sat beside her on the step. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault, isn't it? If I hadn't put up that note, if I'd found another way, June would be dead." Eliza wiped her eyes roughly. "And I'd still be sitting in that empty nursery losing my mind. So don't you dare apologize for giving me a reason to keep living." Sam wanted to put his arm around her, wanted to pull her close and tell her it would be all right, but he couldn't. Any gesture of comfort could be misconstrued, turned into more ammunition for the gossips. "What are we going to do?" he asked instead. "I don't know." Eliza stared out at the gray afternoon. "They're not going to stop. The more we resist, the more certain they'll be that we're hiding something. And eventually they'll make life so miserable that I'll have to choose between my reputation and June." "You shouldn't have to make that choice." "But I do." She turned to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "The worst part is, I can't even be angry at them for thinking it, because they're not completely wrong." Sam's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Eliza's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I mean, I look forward to seeing you every day. I mean, I think about you when I'm home alone. I mean, when I'm holding June and you're sitting across from me and we're talking by the fire, I feel more like myself than I have since William died. And that terrifies me because it means maybe they're right. Maybe I am shameless. Maybe I do want more than I should." The confession hung in the air between them. Sam's heart was hammering so hard he could barely breathe. "Eliza, don't." She stood up quickly, putting distance between them. "Don't say anything. I shouldn't have told you that. I need to go." "Wait." But she was already hurrying toward her door, and Sam had enough sense not to follow. He rode home with his head spinning, Eliza's words echoing in his mind. "I think about you when I'm home alone." He thought about her too, more than he should, more than was proper for a man whose wife had been dead less than 2 months. He thought about the way Eliza hummed while she nursed June, the way she laughed at his bad jokes, the way the firelight caught in her hair. He thought about how empty the house felt when she wasn't there, and how right it felt when she was. But that didn't mean he could act on it. Rose was barely cold in the ground. Eliza was grieving her husband and baby, and the entire town was already convinced they were carrying on some sordid affair. If he told her how he felt, he'd only make everything worse. So he said nothing. But the tension between them grew thick and uncomfortable. Eliza still came every day to nurse June, but the easy conversation they'd shared was gone. They were painfully polite to each other now, careful to keep physical distance, avoiding eye contact. The silences that had once been comfortable now felt suffocating. June seemed to sense the change. She fussed more, cried harder, reached for Eliza with desperate hands like she was afraid the woman would disappear. Sam hated it. Hated the careful distance, hated the way Eliza wouldn't meet his eyes, hated that the town's poison was infecting the one good thing he'd found in the wreckage of his life. 3 days after their conversation on the porch, the storm hit. It started with a letter slipped under Eliza's door. Sam knew about it because Eliza showed up at his house at noon with the paper crumpled in her fist and fury in her eyes. "Read this," she demanded, shoving it at him. Sam unfolded the letter. The handwriting was spiky and anonymous, the message brutally clear. "Whore. Everyone knows what you're doing at that ranch. Spreading your legs for a grieving widower while pretending to care for his brat. You're a disgrace to your husband's memory and a stain on this town. If you had any decency, you'd leave Colorado and take your shame somewhere else." Sam's vision went red. "Who sent this?" "It's not signed. Could be anyone." Eliza's voice was shaking. "I found it this morning. And this afternoon, someone threw a rock through my kitchen window with 'Shameless' painted on it." Jesus Christ. Sam crumpled the letter in his fist. "That's it. I'm going to town. I'm going to find out who did this and what? Beat them up? That'll really help." Eliza sank into the chair, her bravado crumbling. "It doesn't matter who did it specifically. It's the whole town. They've decided I'm a fallen woman and nothing I say will change their minds." Then we'll leave. Both of us. We'll take June and go somewhere else. Denver or California or run away? Start over somewhere new? Eliza laughed bitterly. With what money? And what would we tell people when we got there? That we're not married, but we're traveling together with a baby? That'll go over well. Then what do you want to do? Sam's voice cracked with frustration. Just let them drive you away? Let them win? I don't know. Eliza's shout startled June, who began to cry. Eliza immediately softened, picking up the baby and rocking her. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Mama's just upset. Sam froze. Mama. Eliza realized what she'd said a moment later. Her eyes went wide. I didn't mean that just slipped out. I know I'm not her real mother. Yes, you are. Eliza stared at him. You're the one who feeds her, Sam continued, his voice rough. You're the one who holds her when she cries. You're the one she reaches for when she's scared. Rose gave birth to her, but you've been her mother for the past month. That makes you real. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Sam, I'm going to town, he said abruptly. I'm going to make it clear that anyone who harasses you answers to me. Stay here with June. Lock the doors. I'll be back by nightfall. Don't do anything stupid. Too late for that. Sam rode hard for Bitterroot, his anger building with every mile. By the time he reached the main street, he was ready to tear the town apart with his bare hands. He went straight to the sheriff's office and slammed through the door. Sheriff Mitchell looked up from his desk, unsurprised. Calder, I wondered when you'd show up. Someone threw a rock through Mrs. Hart's window. Someone left a threatening letter on her property, and you're going to find out who did it. Am I now? The sheriff leaned back in his chair. And what makes you think I have time to investigate every piece of gossip gone sideways? Because it's your job. Because it's harassment and property damage. Because you're sweet on the widow and don't like hearing what the town thinks about it? Sam's fists clenched. Careful. I'm not the one who needs to be careful, Calder. You are. The sheriff stood up, his expression hard. You want to know the truth? Nobody threw that rock. Mrs. Hart's window is fine. I checked on it myself this morning when I heard the rumors. Sam went still. What? The letter probably exists. People are cruel when they're scandalized. But the rock? The sheriff shook his head. That's just talk. Someone said they heard someone else say they saw it happen. By tomorrow, it'll be 2 rocks and a burning cross. That's how these things work. So you're saying people are lying? I'm saying people are talking, and talk turns into truth if enough people repeat it. The question you need to ask yourself is why everyone's so ready to believe the worst about you and Mrs. Hart. Because they're bored and mean-spirited. Because you're not denying it. The sheriff came around the desk. Look, Calder, I don't care what you do in your private life, but if you want the gossip to stop, you need to give people a different story. As long as Mrs. Hart keeps visiting your ranch every day and staying till all hours, people are going to think you're betting her. That's just human nature. She's nursing my baby. Then find another wet nurse. Or switch June to bottles. Or, the sheriff hesitated, then continued carefully. Or marry the woman and make it legitimate. Sam felt like he'd been punched. What? You heard me. You're both young, you're both widowed, you're clearly spending all your time together anyway. If you got married, the scandal disappears. Widow marries widower to help raise his motherless child. That's respectable. That's understandable. Hell, people would probably call it romantic. Rose has been dead for 2 months. And life goes on. You need help with June. Mrs. Hart clearly cares about the baby. I'm not saying you have to love each other. I'm saying you could solve both your problems with a simple ceremony and a wedding band. Sam's head was spinning. Marriage. To Eliza. The thought was absurd and impossible, and yet, I need to go, he said. He left the sheriff's office and stood on the wooden sidewalk staring at nothing. The street was busy with afternoon traffic, wagons rattling past, women with shopping baskets, men loitering outside the saloon. Normal life continuing while Sam's world tilted on its axis. Marriage. The sheriff's words kept echoing in his head. Marry the woman and make it legitimate. It would solve the scandal, would give Eliza protection and June a mother, would let them continue the arrangement that had been working until the town decided to destroy it. But it would also mean binding himself to a woman he barely knew. A woman he was starting to have feelings for that he wasn't ready to examine. A woman whose grief was as fresh and raw as his own. Was that fair to either of them? Sam didn't know. All he knew was that something had to change. The current situation was untenable. Eliza was being harassed. June needed stability. And Sam was tired of being alone. He went to the general store and bought supplies. Then he stopped at the church, though he didn't know why. The building was empty, cool and quiet. He sat in a back pew and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. "Rose," he whispered finally, "I don't know what to do. I don't know if this is betraying you or honoring you. I don't know if you'd want me to do this. But June needs a mother, and Eliza needs to be a mother. And I can't protect either of them the way things are. So if you're listening, if you can somehow give me a sign..." Nothing happened. The church stayed silent. Sam sat there for another 10 minutes, then stood and left. He didn't feel better, but he felt clearer. Sometimes you didn't get signs from the dead. Sometimes you just had to make a choice and live with it. By the time he rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting. He found Eliza on the porch, wrapped in a shawl with June sleeping in her arms. She looked up when she heard his horse. "Did you kill anyone?" "No." "Good." She studied his face. "What happened?" Sam dismounted and climbed the porch steps. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I talked to the sheriff. He said the rock through your window probably didn't happen. Just gossip that turned into fact. So I panicked over nothing. You panicked because someone sent you a hateful letter and you had every reason to think it would escalate." Sam turned to look at her. But he also said something else. He said the only way to stop the gossip is to give people a different story. Eliza's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. He thinks I should stop coming here." "No, he thinks we should get married." The words dropped between them like a stone into still water. Eliza went absolutely still. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "What?" "Marry me." Sam rushed on before he could lose his nerve. "Not for love or romance or anything we're not ready for, just a practical arrangement. You need protection and June needs a mother. If we're married, the scandal disappears. You can live here and care for June without anyone being able to say a word about it." "Sam, that's insane." "Is it? We're already doing everything married people do except sharing a bed. We eat together, we care for June together, we talk every evening. The only difference would be a legal document and you living here instead of riding back and forth." "The difference is we barely know each other. We're both grieving. We're not..." Eliza's voice cracked. "This isn't how marriages should start." "Maybe not, but it's practical. And it protects you. And what about you? What do you get out of this?" Sam looked at June, sleeping peacefully in Eliza's arms. Then he looked at Eliza, at her tired, fierce face and the way she held his daughter like something precious. "I get a mother for my child," he said quietly. "I get someone to help me run this ranch. I get a partner who understands grief and won't expect me to be something I'm not. And maybe, someday, I get a friend." Eliza's eyes were shining with tears. "This is crazy." "I know. People will still talk. They'll say we've been carrying on all along and are just making it official. Let them. At least you'll be safe here. At least June will have what she needs." "And what about what we need? What if you meet someone else someday? What if I do? What if we wake up in 5 years and resent each other?" "Then we'll deal with it." Sam held her gaze. "But right now, today, this solves our problems. And I'd rather take a risk on something that might work than watch you be driven away by people who enjoy cruelty." Eliza looked down at June. The baby was snoring softly, her tiny fist curled against Eliza's chest. For a long moment, there was only the sound of evening birds and the distant lowing of cattle. "If we do this," Eliza said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I can't give you what Rose gave you. I can't be her. I'll care for June, and I'll help with the ranch, and I'll be a good wife in all the practical ways. But I can't promise you love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for partnership. And if I say yes, where would I sleep? You can have Rose's sewing room. It's small, but it's private. We'll be married on paper, but we don't have to. Sam's face heated. We don't have to have a real marriage in that way. Not unless we both want to. Eliza was quiet for a long time. Sam watched emotions flicker across her face. Fear, hope, resignation, something that might have been relief. Ask me properly, she said finally. Sam blinked. What? If we're going to do this, ask me properly. Not like it's a business arrangement, like it's a real proposal. Sam's heart started hammering. He stood up and held out his hand. When Eliza took it, he pulled her gently to her feet, careful not to wake June. Eliza Hart, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Will you marry me? Will you be June's mother and my partner and the person I build a life with for whatever that life turns out to be? Eliza looked up at him. In the fading light, her eyes were dark and deep and full of something Sam couldn't name. Yes, she whispered. God help us both, but yes. Sam felt something loosen in his chest, relief or terror, or maybe both. He squeezed her hand gently. We'll make it work, he said. We'd better. Eliza managed a shaky smile. Because if this falls apart, we'll both look like fools. Then we won't let it fall apart. They stood there on the porch as night fell, two grieving people agreeing to bind their lives together for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't the kind of beginning anyone dreamed of, but it was real, and it was theirs. And maybe, Sam thought, as Eliza leaned slightly into his shoulder and June slept peacefully between them, maybe that was enough. They were married 3 days later in the same church where Sam had sat alone trying to pray for guidance. The ceremony was brief and awkward, witnessed only by Sheriff Mitchell and his wife, who served as the legally required second witness. Eliza wore a simple gray dress she'd owned for years. Sam wore his Sunday suit that still smelled faintly of mothballs. June fussed through the entire service, and when the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence that followed felt less like consent and more like the town holding its breath to see what scandal would come next. I now pronounce you man and wife, the preacher said, his tone suggesting he was fulfilling a legal obligation rather than celebrating a joyous occasion. You may kiss the bride. Sam and Eliza looked at each other. They hadn't discussed this part. After a heartbeat of hesitation, Sam leaned forward and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek. Eliza's skin was cool under his lips. She smelled like lavender soap and the faint sweetness of milk. Congratulations, Sheriff Mitchell said as they signed the marriage certificate. He sounded genuinely relieved. This should put an end to the talk. It didn't. If anything, the marriage made the gossip worse. Now, instead of whispering that Sam and Eliza were carrying on an affair, people whispered that they'd been forced to marry because Eliza was pregnant. Never mind that she wasn't. Never mind that anyone who looked at her could see she'd only recently given birth herself. The story was too good to let facts get in the way. Sam heard it at the feed store 2 days after the wedding. A rancher named Tucker was holding forth to a small crowd while Sam loaded supplies into his wagon. Convenient timing, don't you think? Wife dies, neighbor's baby dies, and suddenly they're shacked up together. I give it 3 months before she's showing. Maybe the baby was his all along, someone else suggested. Maybe that's why her husband died so sudden. Couldn't stand the shame of raising another man's child. Sam had dropped the feed sack and crossed the distance before conscious thought caught up with him. He grabbed Tucker by his shirt and slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle the tools hanging there. Say that again, Sam growled. Say one more goddamn word about my wife and I'll break your jaw. Tucker's face went red, then white. I didn't mean nothing by it. Yes, you did. You meant to drag a good woman's name through the mud because you've got nothing better to do than make up lies. Sam's grip tightened. My wife saved my daughter's life. She nursed a starving baby back to health and asked for nothing in return. And if you or anyone else in this town wants to twist that into something ugly, you'll answer to me. Understood? Understood, Tucker wheezed. Sam released him and stepped back. The other men in the store were watching with wide eyes. Sam straightened his shirt and picked up the feed sack like nothing had happened. I'll take my supplies now, he told the clerk, and I'll be paying cash, so there's no need to put it on credit and gossip about what I'm buying. He loaded the rest of his order in tense silence, paid, and drove the wagon home. His hands were shaking on the reins. Violence wasn't his nature, but hearing those men talk about Eliza like she was some kind of schemer or loose woman had broken something inside him. When he got back to the ranch, Eliza was in the kitchen kneading bread dough with June secured in a sling against her chest. The baby was dozing, and Eliza was humming softly as she worked. It was such a domestic scene, so normal and peaceful, that Sam felt his anger drain away. "How was town?" Eliza asked without looking up. "Fine. You're a terrible liar." She finally glanced at him, taking in his still clenched jaw and rigid posture. "What happened?" "Nothing I couldn't handle." "Sam?" He sighed and told her about Tucker and the feed store. Eliza's hand stilled in the dough. When he finished, she turned to wash her hands in the basin, her movements slow and deliberate. "You can't fight everyone who talks about us," she said quietly. "You'll spend the rest of your life with bloody knuckles and nothing to show for it." "I can't just let them say those things." "They'll say them whether you fight or not. Words are cheap and cruelty is free." Eliza dried her hands and turned to face him. "The only thing that will stop the talk is time. Eventually, they'll get bored and move on to the next scandal. We just have to outlast them. And what if it gets worse before it gets better? What if they... Then we deal with it." Eliza's voice was firm. "Together. That's what we agreed to, isn't it? Partnership." Sam nodded slowly. She was right. Getting into fistfights every time someone whispered wouldn't solve anything. It would only confirm what people already believed, that he was a violent man who'd trapped a vulnerable widow into marriage. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this isn't what you signed up for." "Neither did you." Eliza managed a tired smile. "We're both just making this up as we go." The first week of marriage was strange and stilted. They moved around each other like polite strangers, careful not to touch, careful not to presume. Eliza had moved her few belongings into the small room off the kitchen, and she kept the door closed whenever she wasn't nursing June or doing chores. Sam gave her space, sleeping alone in the bedroom he'd shared with Rose, and trying not to think about how empty it felt. They developed routines. Eliza woke first and made breakfast while Sam did the morning feeding. They ate together, passing dishes and making small talk about the weather or what needed fixing on the property. Then Sam would head out to work the ranch while Eliza cared for June and managed the house. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire, Eliza nursing the baby while Sam carved or mended tack, and they'd talk about safe things, June's growth, the cattle, plans for spring planting. What they didn't talk about was anything real. They didn't mention Rose or William or Thomas. They didn't discuss the gossip or the strain of living together or the fact that they were legally bound to each other despite barely knowing each other's histories. They kept everything surface level and careful, two people coexisting in the same space but not really living together. It was June who forced them closer. 10 days after the wedding, the baby developed a fever. Eliza noticed it first when June felt too warm during a feeding. By evening, June was crying inconsolably, her little face flushed and her body burning up. Eliza walked the floor with her while Sam rode to town for the doctor, pushing his horse harder than he should have through the dark. Dr. Hamilton arrived near midnight, examined June with gentle hands, and delivered his verdict. "It's an infection. Could be from teething or could be something she picked up. Hard to say with babies." He mixed a bitter powder with water. "Get this into her if you can. Keep her cool. If the fever doesn't break by morning, come get me again." But June wouldn't take the medicine. She spit it out and screamed, her cries growing weaker as the night wore on. Eliza tried everything, walking, rocking, singing, nursing, but nothing helped. June was too hot and too miserable to latch properly, and when she did manage to drink, she brought it back up minutes later. By 3 a.m, Eliza was crying as hard as the baby. She sat in the rocking chair with June pressed to her chest, both of them soaked with sweat and tears. "She's getting worse," Eliza choked out. "Sam, what if—" "She's not dying." Sam knelt beside the chair and touched June's forehead. She was burning up. Terror clawed at his throat, but he pushed it down. "We're not losing her. We just need to cool her down." He grabbed a basin and filled it with lukewarm water from the pump, then stripped June down to her diaper. Eliza held the baby while Sam sponged her tiny body with the damp cloth, murmuring nonsense words of comfort. June whimpered but didn't have the strength to fight. "Keep doing that," Eliza said. "I'll try the medicine again." This time, with June too exhausted to resist, Eliza managed to get some of the bitter liquid down her throat. June gagged, but swallowed. They waited, watching her with desperate eyes. The fever didn't break. If anything, June seemed to be slipping further away. Her cries grew quieter. Her body went limp in Eliza's arms. Sam felt his world narrowing down to this moment, this chair, this baby who'd already survived too much to die now. "No," he said hoarsely. "June, no, stay with us, please." Eliza was praying under her breath, rocking and praying and crying. Sam pressed his hand to June's chest, feeling for her heartbeat. It was there but too fast, fluttering like a trapped bird. "I can't lose her," he whispered. "Eliza, I can't." "You won't." Eliza's voice was fierce despite her tears. "We won't. She's stronger than this. She's a fighter." They stayed up all night taking turns holding June and sponging her down. Sam made tea that neither of them drank. Eliza sang every lullaby she knew until her voice went raspy. They moved around each other in a desperate dance, united by fear and love for the tiny person who'd brought them together. Dawn was just breaking when June's fever finally cracked. Her skin cooled. Her breathing evened out. She stopped that terrible, weak whimpering and fell into real sleep, her little fist curled against Eliza's breast. Sam felt his knees go weak with relief. He sank into the chair across from Eliza and dropped his head into his hands. His whole body was shaking. "She's all right," Eliza whispered. "Sam, she's all right." He looked up. Eliza was crying again, but these were different tears. Tears of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. June slept peacefully in her arms, her color returning to normal, the crisis past. Without thinking, Sam stood and crossed to them. He wrapped his arms around both Eliza and June, pulling them close. Eliza leaned into him, her body sagging with exhaustion, and for the first time since they'd married, they held each other without hesitation or careful distance. "Thank you," Sam said into Eliza's hair. "Thank you for fighting for her." "She's my daughter, too." Eliza's voice was muffled against his chest. "I couldn't lose her any more than you could." They stayed like that for a long moment, the three of them wrapped together in the gray morning light. Something had shifted between them during the long night. Some wall had come down. They'd stopped being two separate people coexisting and started being something else, a unit, a family, two people bound together by more than just legal paperwork and social convenience. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were self-conscious, but not regretful. Sam helped Eliza to her feet and settled her in the bedroom, his bedroom, with June. "Sleep," he said. "I'll handle the chores. Just rest." "Sam, please. You've been up all night. Let me take care of things." Eliza nodded and lay down with June curled against her. Within minutes, both of them were asleep. Sam stood in the doorway watching them, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. This was what a family looked like. This messy, exhausted, hard-won thing. Not perfect or romantic, but real. He closed the door quietly and went to start his day. The near loss of June changed things between them. The careful politeness began to erode, replaced by something more genuine. They started talking about real things again. Not just surface pleasantries, but actual conversations about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for June's future. Eliza told him about her childhood in Ohio, about the schoolhouse where she taught before marrying William. Sam told her about his father's farm in Pennsylvania, about coming west with nothing but a wagon and a dream of open land. They worked together more easily now. Eliza helped with ranch chores when June was napping, and Sam took over cooking when Eliza was too tired. They developed a rhythm that felt natural instead of forced, and slowly, carefully, they began to build something that looked almost like friendship. But the outside world wasn't getting easier. If anything, their marriage had made them more isolated. The women who'd once been cordial to Eliza now cut her dead in the street. The men who'd worked cattle drives with Sam found reasons not to hire him. Even the preacher who'd married them seemed uncomfortable whenever Sam showed up for Sunday service. His sermons suddenly focused on propriety and the dangers of hasty decisions. The only person who treated them normally was Sheriff Mitchell, and even he had limits. I'm not saying you did anything wrong, the sheriff told Sam one afternoon when Sam came to file a complaint about fence cutting on his property. But you've got to understand how it looks. Young widow and widower getting married weeks after their spouses die. People don't trust it. People need to mind their own business. People are human. They gossip. They judge. And right now, you and Mrs. Calder are the favorite topic. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. My advice? Keep your heads down. Don't give them anything new to talk about. Eventually, something else will come along and they'll forget about you. Sam left the office feeling hollowed out. Keep your heads down. Don't give them anything to talk about. As if existing was somehow provocative. As if loving his daughter and marrying a woman who could help raise her was scandalous. He came home to find Eliza in the garden, planting early vegetables with June strapped to her back in the sling. She looked up when she heard his horse, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. How was town? The usual. Sam dismounted and came to stand beside her. Sheriff says we need to keep our heads down and wait for people to get bored. So we're supposed to just endure it. Apparently, Eliza stabbed her trowel into the dirt with more force than necessary. I'm tired of enduring. I'm tired of being the subject of gossip. I'm tired of people treating me like I'm shameful when I haven't done anything wrong. I know. Do you? She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. Because you can go to town and people will at least talk to you. They'll serve you at the store and take your money and treat you like a person, even if they whisper behind your back. But when I go to town, women cross the street to avoid me. They pull their children away like I'm contagious. Last week, Mrs. Blake refused to sell me eggs, said she didn't want my kind of business. Sam felt anger surge through him. She what? It doesn't matter. Eliza turned back to her planting. I don't need her eggs. I don't need any of them. But her voice was shaking, and Sam could see the way her shoulders were hunched like she was trying to protect herself from invisible blows. This proud, strong woman who'd saved his daughter was being ground down by petty cruelty, and he didn't know how to stop it. Eliza, I knew what I was signing up for, she said. I knew marrying you would make the gossip worse before it got better. I made that choice with open eyes, but knowing it and living it are different things. Sam knelt beside her in the dirt. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing to do except wait and hope. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of soil across her cheek. I just wish I understood what I did that was so terrible. I fed a baby. I married a man who needed help. Since when is that shameful? It's not. They're the ones who should be ashamed. But they're not. Eliza's laugh was bitter. They're righteous. They think they're protecting the community from people like us. Behind them, June made a happy gurgling sound and grabbed at Eliza's hair. The baby had no idea what her parents were discussing, no concept of the storm they were weathering on her behalf. She just knew she was safe and fed and loved. Look at her, Sam said softly. She's thriving because of you, because we made the choice we made. That has to count for something. It counts for everything. It just doesn't make it easier. They finished the planting in silence. That evening, after June was asleep and the dishes were washed, they sat by the fire as usual. But instead of careful small talk, they sat in honest quiet, two people too tired to pretend everything was fine, but committed enough to keep going anyway. Tell me it gets better, Eliza said finally. Tell me in 6 months or a year we won't still be pariahs. I don't know if it gets better, Sam said honestly, but I know we're stronger together than we were apart. And I know June needs us both. So whatever comes, we face it together. Eliza nodded slowly. Together? It wasn't a promise that everything would be all right. It was just an agreement to keep standing, to keep fighting, to keep building this strange, imperfect family they'd cobbled together from grief and necessity and something that was starting to feel dangerously close to hope. The crisis came 3 weeks later in the form of a letter from the bank. Sam found it tucked in the door when he came in from morning chores, an official envelope with the bank's seal. He opened it with numb fingers, already knowing what it would say. Dear Mr. Calder, this letter serves as formal notice that your property loan is in default. As per the terms agreed upon by your late wife, Rose Calder, payment in full is due within 30 days or the property will be seized to satisfy the debt. Sam read it 3 times, his mind refusing to process the words. Property loan. Rose. Seized. What's wrong? Eliza had come into the room with June on her hip. She took one look at his face and set the baby in her cradle. Sam, what is it? He handed her the letter wordlessly. Eliza read it, her face going pale. I don't understand. Rose took out a loan? She must have. Sam's voice sounded distant to his own ears. Last spring, I remember her going to town a few times, saying she had business to handle. I thought she was just buying supplies or visiting friends. I never asked. What was the loan for? I don't know. Sam crossed to the small desk where Rose had kept household papers. He rifled through bills and receipts, looking for anything that might explain. There, a copy of the loan agreement, Rose's signature at the bottom. $3,000, due in full within 1 year or upon her death, whichever came first. $3,000, Sam whispered. Jesus, Rose, what were you thinking? Look at the date, Eliza said, reading over his shoulder. March 15th. That was just before she got pregnant. Sam's stomach turned over. She must have known we were struggling, must have thought we needed the money to get through the year. Did you? Sam wanted to say no, wanted to believe they would have managed. But the truth was the winter had been brutal, and the cattle prices were down, and they'd been one bad season away from losing everything. Rose had known that, so she'd borrowed money to keep them afloat, never imagining she wouldn't be alive to help pay it back. I can't lose this ranch, Sam said, his voice cracked. This is June's inheritance. This is everything Rose and I built. If we lose it, we won't. Eliza's voice was firm. How much do you have saved? Maybe $500. Not nearly enough. Then we'll find another way. We'll sell cattle, sell equipment, whatever we need to do. That won't be enough either, not in 30 days. Sam felt panic rising in his throat. They're going to take it. They're going to take everything, and June and I will have nothing. You'll have me. Eliza grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. Sam, listen to me. You have me, and I have money. Sam blinked. What? My husband's life insurance. It wasn't much, but I haven't touched it. About $1,800. She squeezed his shoulders. Add that to your savings and sell some cattle, and we can make up the difference. I can't take your money. Why not? We're married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. Isn't that how it works? That's your security, your safety net if… Sam couldn't finish the sentence. If this marriage falls apart. If you need to leave. If what? If I need to run away from my own life? Eliza shook her head. I'm not going anywhere, Sam. This is my home now, too. June is my daughter. This ranch is my future as much as yours. So we use my money to save it. Eliza, seek it. No arguments. We're doing this. Her eyes were fierce. We're not losing everything Rose built. We're not letting the bank take June's inheritance. We're going to fight. Sam felt something break open in his chest. Gratitude and relief and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. Thank you, he managed. God, Eliza, thank you. Thank me by figuring out which cattle we can sell quickly. I'll ride to my old property tomorrow and get the insurance money. We have 30 days. That's enough time if we're smart about it. They worked through the night making plans. Sam went through the herd, identifying which steers could be sold immediately. Eliza tallied their combined savings and calculated exactly how much they needed to raise. By dawn, they had a plan that was desperate but possible. Sell 20 head, use Eliza's insurance money, scrape together every spare dollar from household funds. It still might not be enough, but it was their only chance. The next week was brutal. Sam drove the cattle to market in Denver, pushing hard to get the best price. Eliza sold everything she could from her old property, furniture, tools, even William's clothes. They counted every penny and stretched every dollar, living on beans and day-old bread. And through it all, they worked as a team. No more careful distance. No more polite strangers. They were partners now in the truest sense, fighting for their shared future with everything they had. Sam returned from Denver 3 days before the payment was due, hollow-eyed and exhausted. He'd gotten a fair price for the cattle, but not the windfall they'd hoped for. He handed Eliza the money, $2,200, and watched her face as she counted it. We're still $800 short, she said quietly. I know. Sam slumped into a chair. I pushed as hard as I could. The buyers knew I was desperate, and they used it against me. Eliza set the money on the table and stared at it like she could multiply it through sheer force of will. My insurance money is in the bank in town. 1,800. That puts us at 4,000 even. We need 3,000 to satisfy the loan. So we have 1,000 extra, which we'll need for operating expenses, feed, seed, supplies to get through next season. Eliza rubbed her temples. We're cutting it close, but we can do this. We can make the payment and still have enough left to survive. Sam wanted to feel relieved. They'd scraped together the money through backbreaking work and sacrifice. They'd done the impossible, but something about the whole situation sat wrong in his gut. I'm going to the bank tomorrow, he said. I'll pay off the loan and get the paperwork showing the ranch is clear. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I'm coming. Eliza's tone left no room for argument. This is my fight too now. They rode into Bitterroot together the next morning with June secured in a sling against Eliza's chest. The town was busy with mid-morning traffic, and Sam felt eyes following them as they tied up at the bank. He heard the whispers starting before they even reached the door. Inside, the bank was cool and dim. Mr. Thornton, the bank manager, looked up from his desk when they entered. His expression was professionally neutral, but Sam caught the flicker of surprise. Mr. Calder. Mrs. Calder, what can I do for you? I'm here to pay off my loan. Sam placed the envelope of cash on the desk. $3,000. Payment in full is specified in the letter. Thornton made no move to take the envelope. Instead, he steepled his fingers and looked at them over his spectacles. I'm afraid there's been a development. Sam's blood went cold. What kind of development? The loan was sold 3 days ago to Mr. Gerald Pierce. The name meant nothing to Sam. Who's Gerald Pierce? A businessman from Denver. He's been buying up properties in the area. Thornton's expression was carefully blank. He now holds the note on your ranch. Any payment needs to be made to him directly. Fine. Where can I find him? He's staying at the hotel. But Mr. Calder, I should warn you, Mr. Pierce isn't interested in payment. He wants the property. Eliza's hand found Sam's arm, her fingers digging in tight. The terms of the loan allow for payment. We have the money. He has to accept it. Actually, he doesn't. Thornton pulled out a ledger and flipped it open. The loan agreement includes a clause that allows the holder to demand immediate payment in full. Since Mrs. Calder, your late wife, signed the agreement, her death triggered that clause. Technically, the full amount was due the day she died. That's ridiculous, Sam said. The letter gave me 30 days. That was a courtesy from the bank. But now that Mr. Pierce holds the note, he's within his rights to demand immediate payment or seize the property. Thornton actually looked sympathetic. I'm sorry, Calder, but the law is on his side. Sam felt the world tilting. They'd worked themselves to exhaustion. They'd sold everything. They'd scraped together every dollar they had. And now some stranger from Denver was going to take the ranch anyway because of a legal technicality. I want to talk to Pierce, Sam said through gritted teeth. I'll arrange a meeting. Thornton stood. But I'd advise you to be diplomatic. Mr. Pierce is a powerful man. You don't want him as an enemy. They left the bank and walked to the hotel in silence. Sam's mind was racing. There had to be a way out of this. Had to be some angle he wasn't seeing, but every path he explored led to the same dead end. The law was clear, and they were going to lose everything. Gerald Pierce was waiting for them in the hotel's small parlor. He was a portly man in his 50s, well-dressed in a gray suit with a gold watch chain. He looked up when they entered and smiled like he was greeting old friends. Mr. Calder, and you must be the new Mrs. Calder. He gestured to chairs. Please, sit. Can I offer you coffee? We're not here for pleasantries, Sam said. I'm here to pay off my loan. Ah, yes, the loan. Pierce settled back in his chair, entirely at ease. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Why not? I have the money, $3,000 cash. The terms of the agreement allow me to demand immediate payment, which I did 3 days ago when I purchased the note. Since payment wasn't made immediately, the property defaults to me. Pierce's smile never wavered. It's all quite legal, I assure you. You bought the loan 3 days ago, Eliza said slowly, the same day my husband was in Denver selling cattle. That's not a coincidence, is it? Pierce shrugged. I make it my business to know what's happening in the territories I invest in. When I heard you were scrambling to raise money, I knew the property must be valuable. So I made Mr. Thornton an offer for the loan. A generous offer, I might add. You set us up. Sam's voice was dangerous. You waited until we'd sold everything, until we were vulnerable, and then you pulled the rug out. I made a business decision, nothing personal. Pierce pulled out a cigar and lit it. The fact is, Mr. Calder, your ranch sits on some of the best grazing land in the territory. It also has water rights that would be very valuable to the right buyer. I can make far more money developing that land than I could collecting your measly $3,000 loan payment. That land is my daughter's inheritance. Your daughter will inherit whatever you manage to build elsewhere. I suggest you start looking for a new homestead. You have until the end of the month to vacate. Sam lunged across the space between them, grabbing Pierce by his expensive lapels. You son of a… Sam, don't! Eliza was on her feet, pulling him back. He wants you to assault him. He wants an excuse to have you arrested. Pierce straightened his jacket, unruffled. Your wife is smarter than you are, Calder. I'd listen to her. Sam shook off Eliza's hands but didn't move toward Pierce again. His whole body was vibrating with rage and helplessness. There has to be something we can do, some legal recourse. There isn't. Pierce blew out a stream of smoke. The law is clear, but I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you 60 days to vacate instead of 30. That should give you time to find somewhere else to go. How generous, Eliza said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I think so. Pierce stood. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other business to attend to. Good day, Mr. and Mrs. Calder. I do hope you land on your feet. They left the hotel in a daze. Sam felt like he was moving through water, every step heavy and wrong. People stared as they walked to their horses, but for once Sam didn't care about the gossip. He couldn't think past the roaring in his ears. Sam! Eliza's voice cut through the noise. Sam, we need to go home. He let her lead him to the horses. Let her take the reins and guide them out of town. He barely registered the ride back to the ranch, his mind replaying the conversation with Pierce over and over, looking for the moment he could have said something different, done something different, changed the outcome. But there was no such moment. They'd been outmaneuvered before they even knew there was a game being played. When they got home, Sam went straight to the barn. He needed to hit something, break something, scream until his throat was raw. But he just stood there in the dim space surrounded by tools and hay and the smell of horses and felt himself come apart. This was Rose's dream, their dream, the life they'd planned to build together and pass down to their children. And he'd lost it, failed to protect it, failed to keep the promise he'd made to Rose when she was dying, keep June safe, keep her provided for, give her the home and security she deserved. He didn't hear Eliza come in until she spoke. It's not over. Sam turned. Eliza stood in the doorway with June on her hip, backlit by afternoon sun. Her face was set in determined lines. Yes, it is. The law is on Pierce's side. We have no recourse. The law, maybe. But there are other ways to fight. Eliza came closer. Well, Pierce wants this land for development, right? That means he needs to sell it or lease it. But if we can make the land worthless to him, he might be willing to negotiate. Make it worthless how? The water rights. You said those were valuable. What if we diverted the creek? Or filed competing claims? Or… Eliza's eyes lit up. What if we got the other ranchers on our side? If Pierce is buying up properties, we're not the only ones at risk. Maybe if we band together, we can fight him. Sam wanted to believe her. Wanted to think there was still a chance. But the other ranchers had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with him and Eliza. Why would they help now? They won't care, he said dully. They already think we're scandalous. They'll probably be glad to see us gone. Maybe. Or maybe they'll care more about protecting their own land than about gossip. Eliza shifted June to her other hip. Look, I know it's a long shot, but what else are we going to do? Give up? Walk away from everything we've fought for? We fought and lost. We lost a battle, not the war. Eliza came close enough to touch his arm. Sam, I know you're hurt and angry and scared. So am I. But June needs us to be stronger than this. She needs us to fight for her home. Sam looked at his daughter. June was chewing on her fist, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around her. She trusted them to take care of her, to provide for her, to be the parents she needed. He couldn't let her down. Not again. "All right," he said quietly. "What do we do?" "We start by talking to the neighbors. The Johnsons, the Hartfords, anyone who might be affected by Pierce's land grab. We warn them what's coming and see if they'll stand with us. And if they won't, then we keep fighting anyway." Eliza's smile was grim. "We didn't come this far just to give up now." They spent the next 2 days riding to every ranch within 10 miles, warning the other landowners about Gerald Pierce and his tactics. Most of the conversations were variations on the same theme: initial hostility giving way to grudging concern once people realized their own properties might be at risk. Thomas Johnson, whose ranch bordered Sam's to the north, was the first to really listen. He was a gruff man in his 60s who'd built his spread from nothing and had no patience for city businessmen trying to take what wasn't theirs. "You're saying this Pierce fellow bought up your loan just to force you off the land?" Johnson spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "That's lower than a snake's belly." "It's legal, though," Sam said. "That's the problem. He's using the law to steal property." "Legal don't make it right." Johnson looked at Eliza, his expression softening slightly. "I heard about you two. Heard the talk. Don't care much for gossip myself, but I'll admit I wondered." "Wonder all you want," Eliza said evenly. "But right now we need to focus on the real threat. If Pierce can do this to us, he can do it to you. Any of you. One bad season, one unexpected expense, and you might need a loan too. And if Pierce is the one holding that paper," Johnson's jaw tightened. "Point taken. What do you want from me?" "Help. Solidarity. If we can show Pierce that the community won't stand for his tactics, maybe we can force him to back down. Or maybe he'll just target us next." But Johnson was nodding slowly. "All right, I'll talk to the others, see if we can get a meeting together. But no promises, Calder. A lot of folks still think you and your wife ain't right." "I know, but this is bigger than gossip." Johnson agreed to organize a gathering at his property in 3 days. Sam and Eliza rode home cautiously hopeful. It wasn't much, but it was something. A chance. The meeting was tense from the start. About 15 ranchers showed up, most of them older men who looked at Sam and Eliza with varying degrees of suspicion and distrust. They gathered in Johnson's barn, standing in loose clusters, arms crossed defensively. Sam stood at the front with Eliza beside him, June sleeping in her mother's arms. He felt every hostile stare, every whispered comment, but he pushed through it. "Thank you for coming," he started. "I know most of you don't think highly of me or my wife. I know the rumors, the gossip, the judgment, but right now that doesn't matter. What matters is that a man from Denver is trying to take my ranch through legal manipulation. And if we don't stop him, yours could be next." He explained Pierce's tactics: buying up loans, exploiting technicalities, forcing people off land they'd worked for years. He showed them the loan documents, the letter from the bank, proof that everything Pierce had done was perfectly legal but morally corrupt. "Now maybe you think I deserve this," Sam continued. "Maybe you think I'm getting what's coming to me for marrying too fast or not grieving proper or whatever other sins you want to pin on me. But my daughter doesn't deserve it. June didn't do anything wrong. She's 3 months old and she's about to lose her home and her inheritance because a rich man from the city decided our land was worth more than our lives." The barn was quiet. Some of the men looked uncomfortable. A few looked sympathetic. Most just looked uncertain. Then Martha Hartford, a widow who ran her own spread, spoke up. "What exactly do you want from us, Calder?" "I want you to stand with me. Sign a petition. Go to the territorial governor. Make enough noise that Pierce realizes he can't just steamroll us." Sam's voice grew stronger. "I want us to protect each other the way neighbors should. Because if we let him take my land, we're telling every other vulture out there that Colorado ranchers are easy pickings." "And if we help you, Pierce might come after us," someone said from the back. "He might come after you anyway," Eliza said. She'd been quiet until now, but her voice cut through the murmurs. "That's what men like Pierce do. They find weakness and exploit it. But if we stand together, we're not weak. We're a community, and communities protect their own. Even when some of those own act shameful, That was Mrs. Blake, the boarding house owner who'd refused to sell Eliza eggs. Even then, Eliza met the woman's eyes steadily. Because today you might disapprove of me, but tomorrow Pierce might decide he wants your property. And when that happens, you'll hope someone stands up for you even if they don't particularly like you. There was more muttering, more uncomfortable shifting. Then Thomas Johnson cleared his throat. I'm signing the petition. Whatever else might be true about the Calders, they're being robbed, and I won't stand by and watch it happen. He looked around the barn. Who's with me? Slowly, grudgingly, hands started to rise. Not all of them. Maybe half the people there. But it was enough. They spent the rest of the meeting drafting a letter to the territorial governor and organizing a delegation to deliver it to Denver. Sam felt something loosen in his chest. Not quite hope, but at least the absence of complete despair. As people were leaving, Martha Hartford approached Eliza. The two women looked at each other for a long moment. I lost my husband 5 years ago, Martha said quietly. Everyone told me I should sell the ranch and move back east. Said a woman couldn't run a spread alone. But I stayed and I proved them wrong. She glanced at June. Your baby needed you. You did what needed doing. That takes courage, not shame. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Martha nodded and left. It wasn't forgiveness from the whole town, but it was a start. The delegation went to Denver 4 days later. Thomas Johnson, Sam, and 3 other ranchers. They met with a clerk in the territorial governor's office, who listened politely and promised to pass along their concerns. It felt like shouting into a void, but they did it anyway. While they waited for a response that might never come, Sam and Eliza prepared for the worst. They cataloged every tool, every piece of furniture, every belonging they'd need to move if eviction came. They looked at land for sale in neighboring territories, pricing out what it would cost to start over. But they also kept working the ranch like they'd be there forever. Because giving up, truly giving up, felt like dying. 2 weeks before the eviction deadline, Sheriff Mitchell rode out to the ranch. Sam saw him coming and felt his stomach drop. This was it. Pierce had sent the sheriff to enforce the eviction early, but when Mitchell dismounted, his expression was strange. Almost pleased? Calder. Mrs. Calder. He tipped his hat. I have news. Just tell us, Sam said. We're ready. Gerald Pierce withdrew his claim on your property. Sam blinked. What? He sold the loan back to the bank this morning at a loss. Mitchell pulled out a folded paper. This is from Mr. Thornton. Says your original payment terms are reinstated. You have 90 days to pay the $3,000, and the bank will accept installment payments if needed. Sam took the paper with numb fingers. He read it 3 times, not believing what he was seeing. I don't understand. Why would Pierce back down? Turns out the territorial governor's office got about 200 letters, not just from ranchers, but from businessmen, churchgoers, regular folks, all saying the same thing, that Pierce's tactics were hurting Colorado's reputation and discouraging settlement. Mitchell's smile was grim. The governor made it clear that Pierce's business interests in the territory might suffer if he continued. Pierce decided your ranch wasn't worth the trouble. 200 letters? Eliza repeated. But we only had 15 people at the meeting. Word spread. Turns out people don't like watching their neighbors get robbed, even if they don't much like those neighbors personally. Mitchell looked between them. You two stirred something up. Made folks remember that communities are supposed to take care of their own. Sam felt lightheaded. They'd won. Against all odds, against the law itself, they'd actually won. Thank you, he managed. Thank you for bringing us this news. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. From what I hear, she's the one who convinced Martha Hartford to start writing letters. And Martha convinced half the county. Mitchell tipped his hat to Eliza. You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Calder. After the sheriff left, Sam and Eliza stood in the yard staring at each other. June was awake in Eliza's arms, kicking her feet and babbling happily, oblivious to the miracle that had just occurred. We did it, Eliza whispered. Sam, we actually did it. You did it. You're the one who wouldn't give up, who kept fighting when I wanted to quit. We did it together. Eliza's smile was radiant. That's what partners do. Sam stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, careful of the baby between them. Eliza melted against him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Sam let himself believe they were going to be all right. "I have to pay back the loan," he said into her hair. "I have your insurance money and we have 90 days. We can make it work. Keep the insurance money. For June. For emergencies." Eliza pulled back to look at him. "We'll pay the loan together bit by bit. We have time now. We have a chance." "We have more than that." Sam cupped her face gently. "We have a home, a family, a future." Eliza's eyes were shining. "Yes, we do." And standing there in the yard of the ranch they'd nearly lost, with their daughter between them and the Colorado sun warm on their faces, Sam Calder felt something he hadn't felt since Rose died. He felt happy. The change didn't happen overnight. Winning the fight against Pierce didn't suddenly transform Bitterroot into a town of allies and friends. But something had shifted, like a door that had been locked tight finally cracking open just enough to let in a sliver of light. Martha Hartford was the first to visit. She arrived 3 days after Pierce withdrew his claim, driving a wagon loaded with preserved vegetables and a bolt of calico fabric. She found Eliza hanging laundry in the yard with June propped in a basket at her feet. "Brought you some supplies," Martha said without preamble. "Figured you might be running low after selling everything to fight that loan." Eliza stared at the wagon, then at Martha. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just accept help when it's offered." Martha climbed down and peered at June, who was gnawing on a wooden spoon. "She's getting big. Looks healthy." "She is. Thanks to—" Eliza trailed off, unsure how much to reveal. "Thanks to you refusing to let her starve." Martha's voice was matter-of-fact. "I know what happened, Eliza. Or at least I know enough. You did what needed doing and people judged you for it, but you kept that baby alive and you helped save this ranch. That's worth more than propriety." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "Most people don't see it that way." "Most people are fools." Martha started unloading jars from the wagon. "But some of us are starting to remember what matters. Community isn't about everyone being perfect. It's about standing together when things get hard." They unloaded the wagon together, and when Martha left an hour later, she squeezed Eliza's hand and said, "You did good, girl. Don't let anyone tell you different." That evening, when Sam came in from checking fences, Eliza told him about Martha's visit. His face softened in a way she'd rarely seen. "That's the first kind word anyone's spoken to us in months," he said quietly. "It won't be the last." Eliza bounced June on her hip. "I think things are changing, slowly, but changing." She was right. Over the next few weeks, the hostility that had surrounded them began to thaw. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but enough to notice. Thomas Johnson stopped by to ask Sam's opinion on breeding stock. A farmer named Peterson invited them to a barn raising. Mrs. Henderson from the church, the same woman who'd stood on Eliza's porch months ago calling her shameless, nodded to her in the general store and commented that June was a beautiful baby. It wasn't acceptance, not exactly, but it was tolerance. And after months of outright rejection, tolerance felt like a gift. Sam threw himself into repaying the loan. He worked from dawn until well past dark, repairing equipment, mending fences, preparing the south field for planting. The physical labor helped him process everything that had happened. The near loss of the ranch, the fight with Pierce, the slow rebuilding of their place in the community. His hands grew calloused and his back ached, but the work was grounding, purposeful. Eliza managed the household with the same fierce efficiency she'd shown during the crisis. She kept the books, tracked every penny they earned and spent, calculated how much they could afford to pay the bank each month. In the evenings, after June was asleep, she and Sam would sit at the kitchen table going over figures, making plans, building their future one careful decision at a time. They were partners in every sense now. The careful distance that had marked their early marriage was gone, replaced by easy companionship and shared purpose. They moved around each other with practiced comfort, anticipating needs and filling gaps without discussion. Sam would start coffee before Eliza woke. Eliza would have his work clothes mended and ready. They communicated in gestures and glances as much as words, a private language developed through proximity and trust. But they still slept in separate rooms, still maintained that final barrier between married and truly married. Neither of them acknowledged it, but both felt it, the weight of that closed door between the bedroom and the sewing room. the careful way they avoided touching beyond what was necessary, the unspoken question that hung in the air whenever they said goodnight. It was June who finally broke the stalemate, though she had no idea what she was doing. It happened on a warm evening in late April. Spring had arrived in full force, painting the hills green and filling the air with the scent of new growth. Eliza was nursing June on the porch, rocking slowly while Sam sat on the steps whittling a toy horse for the baby. "She's getting so strong," Eliza said, watching June's little hands knead against her breast. "Look at how she holds her head up. She'll be crawling soon." Sam held up the half-finished horse. "Think she'll like this?" "She'll love it," Eliza smiled. "You're good at that, making things with your hands." "Learned from my father. He could carve anything. Animals, people, whole scenes. Used to sell them at market." Sam's voice grew distant. "I always thought I'd teach my own kids the same way." "You still can. June won't stay a baby forever." "No, she won't." Sam looked at the toy in his hands. "Sometimes I can't believe how much she's grown. Feels like yesterday I was terrified she wouldn't make it through the night." "But she did, because you fought for her." Eliza adjusted June, who was starting to drowse against her chest. "You're a good father, Sam. I hope you know that." Sam's eyes met hers across the porch. Something passed between them. A recognition, a tenderness that had been building for months, but never quite voiced. "And you're a good mother," he said softly. "The best mother June could have." "I'm not her real mother." "Yes, you are." Sam set down the carving and came to kneel beside Eliza's chair. "Eliza, you've been her mother since the night you walked through that storm. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Love does. Choice does. And you've chosen June every single day since we met." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I love her so much it scares me sometimes. I look at her and I think about Thomas, about how I couldn't save him, and I'm terrified something will happen to June too." "Nothing's going to happen to her. We won't let it." Sam reached out and gently touched June's downy hair. "She's strong because you made her strong. She's happy because you love her. That's what matters." June chose that moment to release Eliza's breast and make a contented gurgling sound, milk-drunk and sleepy. Her little hand reached out and grabbed Sam's finger, holding tight. Sam laughed, a sound of pure joy, and Eliza felt something crack open in her chest. This was what a family looked like. Not perfect or traditional or what anyone planned, just real and hard-won and beautiful in its imperfection. "Sam," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever think about us? Not as partners raising June, but as an actual marriage?" Sam's hand stilled on June's head. When he looked up at Eliza, his expression was careful but open. "Every day." The confession hung in the air between them. Eliza's heart was racing. "I don't know when it happened," Sam continued. "Maybe it was that first night when you saved June. Maybe it was during the loan fight when we worked side by side. Maybe it was just slowly, over all these months of living together and talking and building this life." He swallowed hard. But, somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of you as Rose's replacement, or June's caregiver, or my partner out of necessity. I started thinking of you as Eliza, as my wife, as someone He stopped, looking uncertain. "Someone you what?" Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone I could love. Someone I think I'm already starting to love, if I'm being honest." Sam's eyes searched hers. "But I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving William and Thomas. I know we agreed this marriage would be practical, not romantic, so I've kept quiet because I didn't want to push you into something you weren't ready for." Eliza felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're not pushing, and I think I've been feeling the same way. I just didn't know how to say it without feeling like I was betraying William's memory." "Are you betraying his memory?" "No." The word came out firm and clear. "William loved me and I loved him. But William is gone, and I'm still here, still alive, still capable of loving someone new. That doesn't erase what I had with him. It just means my heart is big enough to hold both memories and new feelings." Sam reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender it made Eliza's breath catch. "So where does that leave us?" he asked.
I don't know, but I know I don't want to keep sleeping in separate rooms. I know I want to be your wife in every sense, not just on paper. Eliza managed a shaky smile. I know I want to build a real marriage with you, Sam. One based on more than just June and the ranch. One based on what we feel for each other? Yes. Sam stood and held out his hand. Eliza took it, carefully shifting June to her shoulder, and let him pull her to her feet. They stood facing each other on the porch, the evening air warm around them, their daughter sleeping between them. Can I kiss you? Sam asked. A real kiss? Not just for show? Yes.
He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and pressed his lips to hers. It was gentle and tentative at first, neither of them quite sure how to navigate this new territory. But then Eliza leaned into it, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Sam rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. Court you properly. Take you to dinner. Buy you flowers. All the things I should have done before we got married. Eliza laughed softly. We did everything backward, didn't we? Completely backward. But maybe that's all right. Maybe there's no right way to fall in love. Just the way that works for the people involved. I like that. Eliza kissed him again, brief and sweet. So what now? Now we take it slow. We figure this out together, and we keep being honest with each other about what we need and feel. I can do that. They went inside together, and that night, for the first time since the wedding, Eliza didn't sleep in the sewing room. She put June down in the cradle beside Sam's bed, and when Sam looked at her questioningly, she simply said, I'm tired of separate rooms. They lay together in the dark, not touching at first, both nervous and uncertain. But eventually Sam's hand found Eliza's, and they fell asleep holding on to each other like they'd been doing it for years. The next few months were a revelation. Sam courted Eliza the way he'd wanted to from the beginning, bringing her wildflowers from the pasture, taking her to town for Sunday dinner, stealing kisses in the barn when June was napping. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. They laughed more, touched more, let down the last of their walls, and slowly, carefully, their marriage became real in every sense. The ranch prospered under their joint management. The spring planting went well. The cattle fattened on good grass. Sam made steady payments on the loan, and by midsummer they were halfway to paying it off completely. They worked hard, but they also made time for rest, for joy, for being a family. June thrived. She started crawling at 6 months, pulling herself up on furniture at 8 months, and taking her first wobbling steps just after her first birthday. She called Eliza Mama and Sam Papa with equal ease, knowing nothing of the complicated beginning that had brought them all together. She was a happy, healthy child, loved fiercely by two parents who'd chosen each other and chosen her. The town's attitude continued to soften. Not everyone accepted them. There were still those who whispered and judged. But enough people came around that Sam and Eliza no longer felt like pariahs. They had friends now, people who stopped by to visit, who invited them to gatherings, who treated their marriage as legitimate and their family as real. It was Martha Hartford who suggested the tree planting. She'd stopped by one afternoon in late summer to bring Eliza some fabric scraps for quilting. They were sitting on the porch watching June toddle around the yard when Martha said, "You two should plant something, a tree or a garden or something that will grow with your family, a living reminder of what you've built here." "That's a lovely idea," Eliza said. "What would you suggest?" "Apple tree. They're hardy and they produce for decades. Plus there's something hopeful about planting a fruit.